This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello and welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, where we talk the latest and greatest news in the world of sports. As always, I'm Alex. Today is my alone day. Every Tuesday, that is me. Today is Tuesday, October 4th, and you know what that means? We are getting in the full swing of fall. October is one of my favorite months, not only because my birthday exists within the month, but no, there are a certain few years in which, I'm not sure if it's every year, that in October you're full swing football. Baseball is just getting finished with the World Series, sometimes, right there at the end of October. And basketball gets going near the end of October. And sometimes there's a sweet spot, a day in which all three of these games, all three of these sports happen and coexist with one another in the same day. I call that the sweet spot. But speaking of baseball, on this Tuesday, October 4th, as I said, it is a day in which the first wild card game of the 2016 MLB season takes place. Today is the AL game between the Baltimore Orioles and the home team Toronto Blue Jays. That is tonight, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, which would be 8 p.m. over on the East Coast. That is taking place tonight. We're going to go ahead and preview that in a little while. We're going to talk last night's Monday night football game between the New York Giants and the home team Minnesota Vikings. Another impressive performance there from the home team. We're going to actually look at a few NBA scores. Yes, NBA scores. There were some games last night. There's some games that have gotten going, as a matter of fact, and there will be more coming up as well. Not a lot of games, but there were some, and I'll give you the scores and just a quick overlook of those. And then to end the show, I have a little funny story I read about Steve Young in the news this week, so I think that would be a good way to end the show. Let's go ahead and start. We're going to start in Minnesota with Monday Night Football. The Vikings hosted the New York Giants last night. Eli Manning and the Giants lost this one. The Vikings in favor 24-10. This defense has been lights out, and Sam Bradford has shown that he can play some football when he doesn't need everything on his shoulders. He was 262 yards passing through the air, one touchdown on just only 10 incompletions at 26 for 36. Jerick McKinnon led the Vikings with a touchdown and 85 yards on the ground. Not to be outdone, Mr. Matt Asiata, who I said can get you 3 touchdowns and 25 yards per game, man. He had 6 rushes, 6 yards, and 1 touchdown. Don't forget about him. And, of course, you had some touchdown receptions from, just the one, as a matter of fact, from tight end Kyle Rudolph, who has been playing well as of late, especially with Sam Bradford. We move over to the Giants stat line, and Eli Manning didn't have a horrible game, but he did not have a game-winning type of performance, I imagine. 25 for 45, 261 yards passing and 1 touchdown. Not a horrible performance from Eli, but with the way that their offense was playing plus him, it definitely lacked. It lacked something in terms of a spark, I suppose. Orleans Darkwa, who has taken over for Rashad Jennings in terms of his injury status, had a decent game, 12 rushes for 48 yards. He did have a touchdown with that as well. Bobby Rainey, formerly of a few teams, as a matter of fact, those might remember him with the Buccaneers. He logged 4 rushes for 22 yards. Not a lot in terms of, much production. I mean, a lot of receivers got involved, but not a lot from the guys you'd expect. Only 3 catches and 23 yards from Odell Beckham Jr. Another frustrating night from him for fantasy owners across the nation, as well as fans of the Giants. He has not he has not entered the end zone all year. And again, just a lackluster performance from him, and he is still proving that you can get into his head. Sterling Shepard, the rookie, 4 receptions for 30 yards. Victor Cruz led those fellas, 5 for 50. And then Paul Perkins had 2 for 72. But the problem, is this defense. The New York Giants fumbled. They muffed a kick, which is something you don't want to do with the Vikings. You don't need to give them more opportunities than they already have, in my opinion, at least. Xavier Rhodes logged an interception, returned for 29 yards. The Vikings have just looked good. They have just looked solid. They have had a good defense to help carry them through these games, and now this offense is following them as well. Good production from the team themselves. Like I said, 262 yards passing, 104 yards rushing. That's not a great performance, but you know what? With a defense like this, that is a game-winning performance. And it's more what you can do to win the game than it is to lose the game with these type of defenses. 366 yards as a team, that is not horrible. Excuse me. They were 8 for 16 on third down. That's 50%. You know what I mean? They had less, a little bit of total yards more than the Giants, but they were just doing what they needed to do. They were converting when they needed to convert, and of course the short fields because of their defense. 2-12 were the Giants on third down, 0-2 on fourth. There were only no sacks for either team last night, but this defense of the Vikings is just. I was watching the game, and where I was watching it, my friend's father is a Vikings fan. And he's saying, man, they're just not getting to the quarterback. They're not getting any sacks. And I said, honestly, with this defense, they don't need to get sacks. They're stopping them still. And with Eli will force things at times. And they showed, they didn't have a sack, and they didn't need a sack. They didn't, they were stopping the run. Again, 2 for 12 on third down. They were stopping the run. They were stopping the short pass. And they were daring Eli to throw it into the middle of the field, and again, with not as many passing yards as 261 total roughly, he didn't necessarily test that as often. 5.8 yards per pass, a little lower there. And then the penalties, 8 for 69, 2 turnovers. They were 1 for 2 in the red zone. The possession was about 10 minutes shorter than the Vikings. The Vikings their defense really just dominated this game in a weird sense of the word, because it wasn't domination like, say, the Bills this Sunday over the Patriots, where the Patriots just could get nothing going. The Giants would get things going here and there, but they would just stall. They wouldn't be able to figure out this defense from top to bottom. And this defense that's just what's most impressive about them, in my opinion. The Vikings move on to go face the Texans this Sunday, and they are undefeated. The Minnesota Vikings, not the Texans. The Vikings are currently, as I said, undefeated. And of course, sit at the top of their division at 4-0, followed by the Green Bay Packers, who are on a bye week this week at 2-1, and then 1-3 each for Chicago and Detroit. Not where you want to be heading into this point of the season, but that is how the cookie crumbled, they say. The Giants, same division, go on to face the Packers on Sunday night, as a matter of fact. A home game for Green Bay. And the Giants right now, you have the undefeated Philadelphia Eagles, who, just like the Packers, were on a bye week this week, so 3-0 for them. The Dallas Cowboys in second place are 3-1 after their win over the 49ers. You have the Washington Redskins and the New York Giants, 2-2 each. The Giants are in last place, though. Giants are in last place, and they have some work to do. Of course, with their loss to the Redskins, that is the tiebreaker there. The Giants have a decent stretch of games coming up. The Packers, the Ravens, the Rams, the Eagles. The Packers, they're a good team, obviously. You have Aaron Rodgers, perennial MVP candidate. Excuse me. They have the Ravens, who, to the point of Sunday, they were undefeated until they lost to the Raiders. They had been playing well in a sense. Their defense wasn't dominating. There wasn't typical Ravens defense there for them. And then their offense hasn't quite been going, as expected either. It did struggle at times on Sunday, and I think that has to do with their eventual loss. The Raiders have shown that they have a pretty good offense this year. The Rams, after the Ravens, they will face off, and as a home game for the Giants. But the Rams have been just as dominant lately as a lot of teams on the defensive side of the ball. They are currently 3-1. They lost to the San Francisco 49ers on opening night, on the Monday night, and since then they have not lost. Their defense has played lights out. Their offense has figured at least how to put a few points on the board so that their defense can, hold that and allow them to win games. We saw that this week with the low-scoring win that they had. That's another team that's going to be hard for them. And then you have the Eagles within the division who are currently undefeated. You have rookie Carson Wentz, who's just lighting the NFL up, coming off a great performance against the Steelers last week, having the bye week this week. We'll see where they are there. It's 4 weeks from now. But the Giants need to get something going because they very well could be looking at a 2-6 start. They can win these games, but as of right now, I wouldn't favor them in any of these games. I would give the Packers the win on this Sunday. I would give the Ravens currently, as it stands now, the win. The Rams game might be their closest game, but that defense has shown me that they can play teams that don't necessarily have a consistent offense. And then the Eagles, I think, are going to win this division. So the Giants really need to get moving. They really need to figure it out, in my opinion, because this is not the start you want. And then, like I said, with the Vikings, they have the Texans coming up, the Eagles, the Bears, the Lions. I think that they can win this Texans game. Very similar teams, not amazing offenses, and defenses are pretty solid. I say the Vikings is definitely one of the best defenses in the league currently. The Eagles, that's going to be a test for them. And it's going to be a test for Carson Wentz as well. And that is a week from not this upcoming week, but the following. This can be a test for them for sure. I think the Bears game, which will be at Soldier Field, is going to be a win for this Vikings team. I think a lot is up in the air with these Bears. Currently Jay Cutler is hurt, and as of right now, we don't even know if he will resume quarterback duty when he is healthy. We haven't been told that yet. There has been a rumor out there that they will stick with Brian Hoyer. Then they have the Lions the following week. The Lions have a good offense, but I think the Vikings can win this game. And then the Redskins. The Redskins have been up and down this year. They have an offense, but the defense hasn't shown it can always win them games. They had a tough first week opening Monday night against the Steelers, and since then they have been up and down. But we're looking at a Vikings team that realistically could be 8-0 with the way this defense is playing. 8-0 for the Vikings, who entered the year without their starting quarterback. Sean Hill is their backup, who intended to start and had just traded for a quarterback who was looked at many as somebody who just wasn't going to stay put somewhere and wasn't going to be a starter, and he has been playing great. They are currently averaging 12.5 points against them as we speak. Put up 7 points. Put up 14 points. This team can win. All right, we're going to take our first break. We're going to move on to some baseball. We're going to preview the AL wildcard game. But before we do that, we're going to take our first break here at the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Again, we're moving into baseball, and that is the AL wildcard game between the Baltimore Orioles and the Toronto Blue Jays, who finished with an identical record at 89-73. Again, that game is tonight. If you have TBS, that's where it's being broadcasted. I'm sure you'd have to look at your TV providers to find out where exactly it might be if you don't have it. But 5 p.m. tonight, Pacific Standard Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Of course, the Baltimore Orioles are the visiting team. If you remember, I believe it was last year in which it wasn't these teams, but the last time the Blue Jays were in the playoffs, we had that bat flip from just the century by Jose Bautista. I wonder if that's going to be in the minds of some players tonight, some fans maybe. We have Chris Tillman, who's starting for Baltimore, who was 16-6 on the year this year with a 3.77 ERA against Toronto's Marcus Stroman, 9-10 with a 4.37 ERA, both right-handers. This is going to be a good game in my opinion. These teams have seen each other a lot this year, definitely a lot. They know each other well. I mean, this is going to be, they played 19 times this season. The Blue Jays have won 10 of them, so currently 10-9. This is going to be a good game. I honestly want to say the Blue Jays can win this one. I think they have a little bit better pitching tonight. I wouldn't say it it doesn't show necessarily in the starter, but I think their pitching when it comes to the bullpen as well, a little bit better in terms of the Orioles. These teams are very similar. They're very, very similar. I think at home for the Blue Jays, I think they have the advantage personally, in my opinion at least. Stroman went 0-5 in September, but he had a 3.41 ERA. He hasn't won since August 14th, so he's got, he has a lot to show in terms of a performance, but he hasn't pitched horribly in those 6 September starts. Like I said, he didn't win, but he didn't pitch horribly. They could have went for Francisco Liriano, who, played pretty well and actually beat Tillman head-to-head, striking out 10 in 6 1/3 scoreless innings on Wednesday. But, I think the longer rest, they like Stroman's ability. I think, he's done it a few times for them. I think that they're in a good spot personally. Now, in relation to Chris Tillman, like I was saying, Tillman went 1-0, 3.63 ERA in 4 starts against Toronto this year. He had a 2.38 ERA in 2 starts in the park total. Last Wednesday, though, he did pitch. He gave up 2 runs, 1 earned on 6 hits, 5 2/3 innings during a no decision, walked 3 and struck out 2. I think the big thing here is going to be the pitching. They could have gone with guys Ubaldo Jimenez. He beat the Blue Jays last week. He was pitching with a 2.45 ERA in the past 7 starts. I think, these weren't necessarily the guys that maybe casual fans, knowing to look at stats and such, would decide to be the starters. But they definitely have. Let's just say they have confidence in these guys. Now, the tricky thing is the winner of this game goes to Texas to play the AOS champion Rangers in the best of 5, of course, division series. That starts Thursday. The Blue Jays won their regular season games, the last 2 regular season games, as a matter of fact, in October after going 11-16 in September. But they averaged a AL worst 3.69 runs per game in their 29 games within September to October. So there's so much that you look at in terms of a upside or a advantage for one team, and then you find something that maybe is not necessarily. Again, the Blue Jays won their 2 regular season games in October after going 11-16. You add that to, okay, well, they were this and that, and they showed promise here and there. But really, this is going to be a wacky game, in my opinion. It is. It's going to be an interesting game. I do fully believe Toronto can walk away with the win here. I think, Baltimore's not going to make it easy for them. I don't think so at all. It's just going to be, it's going to be something that I feel either way it goes, I'm not going to be surprised. Personally, me right now, I'm going to pick the Blue Jays. I'm going to say their offense just breaks through a little bit more tonight than the Orioles does. And again, you have guys on the team, Jose Bautista, you have guys that are playing lights out in situations like this, and it'll be interesting to see what the moment of this game is. Now, really quickly, I want to just cover some things in baseball because we're going to be so busy with the playoff games themselves that news might slip. We have, of course, the White Sox fired their manager earlier last week, I do believe, if not pretty much end of last week. But Rick Renteria, who was formerly a Cubs manager, is now going to be the White Sox manager, and that was announced on Monday after Ventura said that he would not return to the position next season. So Rick Renteria will replace Robin Ventura as Chicago White Sox manager. Moving on to a little bit other news. Barry Bonds, the hitting coach for the Miami Marlins, is no longer the hitting coach for the Miami Marlins. He was fired after 1 year with the team, or at least he was let go after 1 year with the team. Apparently there were reports saying maybe he didn't take, or maybe wondering how serious he was when it came to the job from Don Mattingly. You know, there's things that were to be looked at in that sense. Now you look at a team like the Giants. They have Bam Bam Mullins as their hitting coach currently. He was a 200, sub 200 hitter in his career. A lot of people look at that as how can he be a hitting coach, somebody who didn't necessarily have a lot of success in the MLB as a hitting coach, but he has done good things with the Giants. 2 seasons ago, Barry Bonds was a special assistant throughout the spring training games with the Giants. Could he possibly join the staff as another special assistant to the hitting coach this year? Who knows? This is a team that lacked run production. You had so many great starts from the likes of Madison Bumgarner and Cueto and Samardzija that did not get much run support. Is this somebody who could return home, in a sense, to a fan base that adores him and help this team, into a better situation when it comes to their offensive production? Who knows? I wouldn't be surprised to see that happen, honestly. I wouldn't be surprised to see that happen again, in a sense. Last bit of news before we take our last break. Excuse me. And that is the Diamondbacks have cleaned house. They fired GM Dave Stewart and manager Chip Hale. That was announced yesterday afternoon, Monday. The team finished 69-93 this year, 22 games out of first place, and they missed the playoffs again with a record like that. The team announced in the release on Monday that they will discuss an appropriate role for their chief baseball officer, who is Tony La Russa, a name that you might recognize. He's okay, but La Russa will not be the manager, of course. That's a pretty, that situation. They brought in so many guys, especially pitchers this year, to really help them pretty much beat the Giants, beat the Dodgers in this division. The Diamondbacks won the World Series in 2001, and they had a brief, kind of resurgence, I suppose, later in the decade. They had won the NL West again, but they have had 5 straight non-winning seasons, just a steady decline, and you're not, these guys aren't going to keep their job, in my opinion. You look at it, you're not going to make this work if all these things you're putting into it aren't paying off. Arizona went 79-83 last season, and they were expecting better things this year. They signed Greinke to a $206 million deal, added Shelby Miller, like I said, to the pitching staff, but instead they took a 10-game step backwards, going from 79 wins to 69 wins. Again, the 5th consecutive year that they did not reach the playoffs. There's a lot to go into this. And they have to turn it around quick because there's good young players there. Really good young players. You have Paul Goldschmidt. You have, again, Shelby Miller. You have another solid pitcher in Zach Greinke. You have pieces. You need to go out and win. All right, let's take our last break here. We will come back, and I will just recap some NBA games that went on and maybe look at some that might be going on tonight for a quick mention on tomorrow's show. But we'll take our last break, and we'll be right back here at the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. I want to talk to you today about compression gear. Compression gear is popular with professional and amateur athletes everywhere to prevent injuries and for helping heal injuries. Sleeves has the coolest collection of compression gear around. Sleeves carry sizes for women and men as well as kids. Get compression sleeves in over 200 designs to match your teammates and your uniforms. Check out the huge collection of styles and sizes or order something custom for your team at sleeves.com. Get 20% off plus free shipping on purchases of $50 or more when you use the code SPORTSPODCAST. All one word, SPORTSPODCAST. Visit Sleeves, that's spelled SLEEFS.com today. That's SLEEFS.com. Sleeves.com. All right, we're back here at the Golden State Media Concept Sports Podcast, and there was some basketball going on. Yeah, basketball. Yeah, do you remember that? You remember what that is, guys? Basketball. And now this goes back to actually Sunday. There was a game on Sunday, Shanghai and the Rockets. There's been some games actually going on for the last few days now, stretching back to Saturday. So let's just cover some stuff. The Warriors faced off against the Raptors. The Raptors winning that one 93-97. Now, keep in mind, these are not your typical teams. You know, you're not going to have the Steph Currys playing. You're not going to have, the Draymond Greens playing. But there are games nonetheless. And every once in a while, Damari Carroll played for Toronto, So every once in a while you have a bigger name. But the Raptors do win that one 97-93. We had another game that day as well, the Mavericks taking on the Pelicans, which was won handedly by the Pelicans, 116-102. Buddy Hield, 19 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists in a win there for the Pelicans. On Sunday, we had the Rockets facing off against Shanghai, 131-94 in favor of the Rockets. James Harden, 16 points, 3 rebounds, 10 assists. And then for those fans who I know from being a Sacramento native and fan of the Sacramento Kings, and then anybody who was a fan of BYU, maybe Chicago, and the Bulls, Jimmer Fredette had a team-high 33 points, 8 rebounds, and 8 assists for Shanghai in that loss. Moving to yesterday, the Thunder played Spanish League basketball team Real Madrid, yes, just like the soccer counterpart. And Real Madrid won that one, 142-137. Victor Oladipo had 34 points, 2 rebounds, and 5 assists for the Thunder in that loss. The Bucks played a game against the Bulls, 93-91 in favor of the Bucks there. Gregor Monroe led the team with 15 points, 9 rebounds, and 1 assist. Chicago led by Taj Gibson, 11 points, 12 rebounds, and 1 assist. We saw Dwayne Wade in a Bulls jersey on a court for roughly, realistically the first time, and it was weird. It was definitely weird. The Grizzlies they were facing off against the Orlando Magic, 102-97 in favor of the Grizzlies. Evan Fournier for Orlando, 18 points, 2 assists, and 1 steal in the loss there. The Grizzlies again winning that one, 102-97. The Dallas Mavericks, as I confused a minute ago, defeated the Charlotte Hornets, 95-88. Frank Kaminsky, 13 points, 7 rebounds, 1 steal for the Hornets. The Mavericks logged 20 points and 4 rebounds from Seth Curry, brother of Steph Curry. The Denver Nuggets defeated the Toronto Raptors 108-106, led by Jusuf Nurkic, 15 points, 10 rebounds, 3 assists there for Denver. The Spurs lost to the Suns 91-86 in favor of the Phoenix Suns, of course, who were led by Devin Booker, 19 points, 3 rebounds, 1 assist. Kawhi Leonard played for the Spurs. He had 17, 4, and 2. And then the last game of last night, the Trailblazers defeated the Utah Jazz 98-89. Derek Favors led the Utah Jazz in scoring 14 points, 9 rebounds, 1 assist. Alan Crabb for Portland, 15, 2, and 4. We do have some games tonight, again Tuesday, October 4th. The Celtics are taking on the 76ers in Philadelphia tonight. The Heat against the Washington Wizards at home for them. The Wizards, of course. The Rockets host the Knicks in Houston. The Pelicans host the Pacers. The Kings are playing the Lakers, and that is in Anaheim at the Honda Center. And the Warriors will be hosting the LA Clippers at Oracle Arena tonight. We're getting going, people. We are getting going. There'll be more games, of course, throughout the week. A whole stretch of games on Wednesday. Thunder facing off against FC Barcelona. You know, all these teams share the same names almost as their soccer counterparts. It's kind of funny. But that is all I have for basketball as of right now. So I'm going to end the story off with a little bit of a funny, or at least end the show off with a little bit of a funny story. And that involves Steve Young, who had apparently a weird encounter with a ref back when he was the quarterback of the Buccaneers. It is an excerpt from his book, and I will read it to you currently before we get going. So pretty much he says, partway through the second quarter, I'm in the huddle when the head referee taps me on the shoulder. He says, can I talk to you for a second? He says, I step away from the huddle. He says, hey, listen, my daughter's going to BYU, as he whispers. Of course, Steve Young went to BYU. Next thing I know, he starts trying to convince me I should meet his daughter. Quote, I'd like to take her out, he says. I cannot believe this. We're in the middle of a game. I say, okay. I said, what's her name? He tells me, and I return to the huddle. If that wasn't the end of it, it'd still be an excellent take worthy of an inclusion in any life story. But there's more. Back to the quote from the book. Late in the game, we're down 31-23, and I'm trying to mount a comeback. I scramble out of the pocket, take a brutal hit. It causes me to fumble just before the whistle blows to stop the play. I'm lying on the ground when the defense recovers the loose ball, all but sealing our defeat. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a yellow flag lands next to me. The referee whose daughter is headed to BYU calls a personal foul on the defense. First down, Tampa Bay. I get up and brush myself off. Then the referee walks past me and whispers, she likes Italian food. Pretty much the game in which they figured it out took place December 15th, 1985. The Bucs still lost that game 31-23, but not for lack of effort from the mystery official with the daughter who might or might not have gone on a date with Steve Young. I like that story. That's a good story. It's an interesting story. That's a story that you can. That is, like he said, that's a life story. That's a funny story. I read it and I said, you know what? I want to share that. I want to share that with the peeps. It's a good one. But it is time for us to leave. As always, I'd like to mention that I appreciate you listening to this show. Ben does as well. Anthony as well. They will be back with me tomorrow, and we will talk loads and loads of things related to sports. Of course, we will recap the Baltimore-Toronto game. We'll look at some more basketball. We will preview the NL wildcard game between the New York Mets and the visiting San Francisco Giants. And we will look at the games that will be taking place this weekend in terms of who will be facing off against the Texas Rangers. That will be a Thursday game. And, of course, we will look at it a little bit. I don't know if we'll preview it right away, but we'll definitely look at the matchup now that there will be a, for sure, opponent for Texas. But, as always, thank you so much for listening. For Ben, for Anthony, I'm Alex, and we will see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.